Tamar, welcome to the Easy Conversations podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited to hear your story. I've had the opportunity to learn a little bit about what you're doing and the amazing work you're doing and some of the platform stuff that you've created. A lot of stuff that we can get into, especially when it comes to the mental health side of things and the
Yeah.
role playing in that. But before we jump into it, I do want to give you an opportunity to share with the listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what's brought you here today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all the listeners. I'm very excited to be here today. My name is Tamar Blue. I am the founder and CEO of Mental Happy, which is a platform that makes it super easy for group facilitators to create their group and even easier for people to find support groups in any life event that they may need it.
Great. And the most interesting question I always, for myself, I'm curious about is what motivated you to start this platform and then focus so much on the support group side of things?
Yeah, absolutely. Traditionally, a lot of people may understand support groups from the world of groups, right? Like people may have heard that in the past, but people don't really know if you're not experiencing an alcohol recovery journey, you may have never come across one. We had a really growing and thriving community on one of the social media sites. And people kept on asking for even smaller and smaller groups because the social following was quite big and we were
Mhm.
talking a lot about like mental health and people just wanted like smaller communities. I knew that to be support groups and it was just very hard to manage obviously on a social media site that wasn't really built for that. And as we started off in that journey and creating like these small support group spaces, people kept on asking, do you have a support group for this and support group for that? And people would even say, what is a support group? So it just led us down this path of, okay, it's hard to build what we're looking for and what so many others have told us they're looking for on social
Yeah.
sites. So we should probably do it on our own.
Okay. No, that's great. And what have you found has been really powerful and what's setting mental happy, apart from some of the other groups that are out there? And then we can talk about how the platform itself is structured as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing is that we named it mental happy because initially there's just so much stigma around anything mental. Like
Mhm.
anything mental, people just assume you're sick, you've been diagnosed with something, you need to see a shrink kind of thing, you need to go see someone like you. But that's just not necessarily the case. Like people experience mental health decline, emotional mental health decline as it relates to just navigating life, right? Maybe this is graduation season. So maybe you're going away to college and that's making you anxious. Maybe you're going out into the work world and we all know what the state of the world is right now in the United States. And that's very scary for someone making that transition. Maybe you're going through a divorce. Maybe you've just been diagnosed with something, you're injured. So there's just like all of these life things. Maybe it was something from your past in your childhood that while it hasn't caused any huge interruption in your life, that trauma, right? You still really want to navigate those emotions and maybe unravel them and put some language around it, or just experience what you're going through with other people who deeply understand because they're experiencing the same.
Mhm.
So, a lot of the work that we started doing in the support group space was really one, filling the gap between, okay, yes, you may be in one to one therapy. Maybe you can't afford it. Maybe it's inaccessible to you because you live in a rural area. And maybe you just are looking for a little community. So, the way I like to explain mental happy to people is that we really fill that gap between nothing and maybe one to one therapy isn't exactly what you need for months or years at a time. And maybe you just really are also looking for some type of community.
Yeah, absolutely. The community piece is really important for sure. Now, I am curious about your background, like what allowed you to step into this space? And obviously, this is an entrepreneurial pursuit as well. So I am curious around what type of experiences you've had that led you to this place and to build this platform.
Yeah, I listen, like most of the listeners, I've been on all sides of the spectrum, right? Initially, my very first peer support group that I started was in high school. It was really to help any type of student or maybe underclassmen that felt alone, bullied, didn't have anyone to sit with, even at lunch or walk with from one class to another, just really pairing them with someone. I typically tried to pair them with the cool kids. So, me and a couple of other classmates really set out to create this safe space, this safe program on campus in our high school. I've always had an empathetic heart. Obviously, as you get older, remember I talked about navigating those life things, navigating my own life thing. Panic attacks were a big issue for me. For me, I found through going through a few doctors, it was really like diet related,
Mhm.
hydration, what I'm eating, what I'm not eating, sleep. That was really important. But if for anybody who's ever had panic attacks, it could make you feel like you're dying or you can't breathe or you can't stop sweating and hyperventilate. It's a physical sensation that makes you feel like you're going crazy a little bit.
Yeah.
And really just navigating all the anxiety with panic attacks because you then become very anxious that you're going to have another one and it's just this vicious cycle. And I did everything from one-to-one therapy to work through it. Then later on in life stumbled upon a support group that was really just more so not about people like dealing with anxiety, but it was just a period in my life where I felt a little discontent with what I was doing. And it was just a group of other individuals that came together, just navigating what their next life thing could be. And that was immensely supportive because I learned from someone in that group who was a software engineer who was thinking about doing something else with their career. But then
Yeah.
I thought, yeah, I actually really like the idea of software. So it really just mental happy is just really a combination of all of those life experiences, my empathy, my passion, and just doing something new. And then also as I navigated that one-to-one therapy spectrum, just seeing, yeah, there could be some type of supplemental help post that or in between that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And it's really important to touch on the personal side of it because that's where a lot of that passion comes from to pursue these things. Just a few more questions that come up for me when I hear your personal experience. First, where do you think you had this innate desire to even build a peer support group as early as in high school? Like, where do you think you got that from? Just curious if you're able to pinpoint that.
I'm not sure. I think I'm very different than the people who raised me, so I can't say that it came from like any type of upbringing. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's just like very innate. I'm the firstborn. I'm the first person to go to college, the first person
Yeah.
to do like a lot of things in my family. So just innately wanting to have this sense of like purpose and impact and help and I like being pretty independent and creative. So I think these are just like all of my personalities
Yeah.
coming out in some way. And I don't know. I feel when someone tells me like something happened to them, like I feel it really deeply. So it just makes me want to be the person of action versus just doing nothing. So
Mhm.
just even early on and just knowing that, okay, some students are going through this what can we do to help? I'm just this, I need to put my hands around it and fix it kind of person. Not always a good attribute to have in every aspect of life, but
Yeah.
in certain aspects, it could certainly, when that meets passion, it's easier to manage.
For sure. And you touched on something really crucial around your own panic attacks because I think a lot of people don't necessarily connect the dots like you were able to. And you mentioned you were able to get some help with your doctor. Sleep and diet are extremely important. And especially in the world today, we don't necessarily put that level of emphasis on both. Sleep is the first thing we compromise when we're
Right.
stressed, when we have deadlines. A lot of different things come up and sleep will be the first thing that we tend to compromise. And then diet, we don't really pay attention to a whole lot at
Absolutely.
times. So there's a lot of reasons that can happen too. But was your situation that unique, or how did you recognize that those were the factors at play when it comes to the panic attacks? And do other people struggle with that at times based on what you've observed?
Yeah. So, first of all, I'll say it took me a few practitioners to even arrive at
Yeah.
that. Oh, it's not, it was just the first one, the first doctor, I'm sure really great, right? A psychiatrist wanted to just prescribe me something.
Yeah.
I was even more afraid of taking medication. especially when I asked him, like, how long do I have to take this? And he didn't really like have a clear idea. I was just afraid that I was going to be on something forever. I have a parent that has a history of substance abuse and
Yeah.
use. So I just didn't want to be on, even if it was prescribed medication, I just didn't want to be on something that was going to lead me down a path that I was unsure. And then the second piece was after I left that person, I was just like, let me maybe ask someone else. And then I found like another doctor. This one was more of, he was actually just like a, what they call like a general, like he was actually a medical doctor, like just
Yeah.
a general family doctor, if you will. So he wasn't a therapist psychiatrist. And then he talked a little bit about some lighter medication, which ended up being like a placebo. But then he said he wanted to recommend me to one more person who was going, he was like, I don't have all the answers. I'd love
Yeah.
to like at least see you through to maybe someone else until you get the answer that you're looking for. And it was the third practitioner. It was a woman. I think she was like a more on the DO. Maybe she was like a nutritionalist. I can't recall. It was like bear with me. This is like a very long time, like 20
Yeah.
years
Yeah. No
ago.
worries.
But she was the one who really, and she was just a wonderful character. Like she talked about things that I had never even heard of, focusing on your breath and breath work. And I think she was the first person to tell me about like yoga because she had on these really interesting pants. And I was like, oh, I like your pants. She's, oh, yeah, these are my favorite yoga pants. I was like, what is yoga? And it was just like really great. And then she was just really warm and just, I think the difference from like the first and the second and the third practitioner was just more personality and just a little bit more empathy and understanding. And by the time I got to her, it was just not about medication. And it was just deep questions about like my social environment, like my sleep patterns. She told me to record what I eat in a day, write it down. And by the second meeting, it was just, okay, maybe take these things out of your diet, incorporate things like antioxidants, because like berries and antioxidants are really great for easing anxiety. Didn't know that dehydration can trigger panic attacks because your heart races when you're dehydrated. So it's just like a lot of things, like eating fast food at night. A lot of fast food has like the saturated oils and chemicals in fast food can
Yeah.
trigger these type of like heart racings, these panics. It just makes your body feel like it's in this fight or flight state. Because I used to get them like when I'd fall asleep and I'd wake up in a panic attack. And then also just high amounts of sugar in the day
Yeah.
also help trigger. So it was just so much about my erratic eating lifestyle as a college student, not really taking care of myself, that led to this, what I thought was like some type of like mental illness. And that could be dangerous too, because a lot of us like self-diagnose, oh, I'm just depressed. And really it could just be like you're not getting enough sunlight, you're not moving your body enough. Like it really does take a professional to eliminate the
Mm.
things and get to the source of it sometimes.
Yeah.
But it was then 20 years ago that I really realized that there's this tremendous connection between like how what you're putting in your body affects like your mental and emotional and even leads to like physical illness. Like
Yeah.
even now they're talking about how unhealed emotional trauma can trigger autoimmune diseases, even
Yes.
like increase like likelihood of cancers and stuff like that. When I started to set out to really build mental happy, I remembered that experience pretty profoundly. And I wanted, again, the name mental happy to really be about how people's mental connection can affect so much in their life and their life experiences. And sometimes those life events are what cause this emotional decline. And it's not just, oh, I was just born as a depressed person or schizophrenia, just some of the bigger psychosis type things, people, narcissism, like people like to throw around. It could
Yes.
just be this life thing that you're going through or your social or eating habits.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to clarify, the sugar piece, was it more the amount of consumption that was happening during the day? Okay,
Yeah, it was
sure.
a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we don't back then, she was the one who early told me, like, we don't realize how much if you eat sugar, and I was big on, like, Snickers bars and
Yeah.
things that like Diet Coke. So there's those processed sugars, but
Yes.
then when you eat ketchup, if you do eat fruit, like, there's sugar in, like, almost everything.
Yeah,
and things that turn into sugar in the body, like rice and stuff. Like when you put it all together on top of the junk that you're eating, it amounts to quite a lot.
for sure. And good on you for listening to your intuition around not taking the medication because this is the standard route that most people are taking now, especially when it comes to these conditions. And you've touched on so many great points that we can focus on when it comes to managing our mental well-being. And it could be the simplest things. We don't need to
Yeah.
go and get medicated for sure. So now coming back to the support groups, and I know you touched on, you drew the parallels that someone's dealing with substance abuse or misuse, whether it's drug related or alcohol related, you have support groups there, right? And they play an
Right.
instrumental role in people being able to manage that recovery. What is going on in these support groups? Because one of the things in AA and or NA is like you're not necessarily challenging each other. You're just there
Mhm.
to listen. Some of the recovery groups I'm part of, it's not about challenge, but it's all about feedback and reflecting back to individuals what you're hearing because we all have blind spots, right? So we may be
Yep.
able to identify a presenting issue that someone else is bringing up, but we may not see it in ourselves. And this is why I like those conversations where you can reflect back and forth. Now, it could be tough because people can get defensive, but
Yeah.
I'm curious about the structure of the support groups that Mental Happy offers on the platform.
Yeah, I thought about a lot of my life experiences when really setting out to looking and especially looking at what support groups currently are today. And again, I mentioned like how difficult they are to find and how they're structured and the lack of transparency sometimes when you do find one and you want to join. So it's just starting from the first experience, I think the transparency and support groups is really what was lacking in the market in certain places on the internet. Sometimes it was like, oh, okay, support group for people with anxiety. And this is the Zoom link. We meet Tuesdays at 6. And I was just like, okay, who's leading?
Yeah,
Is this just a peer group? Is there someone leading the group? What are the expectations of me? Do I have to have my camera on? Can I have my camera off? Am I going
mhm,
to be expected to share or say anything? So for us with Mental Happy, every group that you're even considering joining, you know all these things up front. You click on it, you can read the group description, you can see the bio of the person leading the group. All of the groups are led by an expert. There are no peer groups on the platform. And I'll get into the reason why
yeah,
in a second. But when the group's meeting, if there's no set schedule, you know that up front. Maybe the schedule changes. If the group has trigger words that maybe it is something you're dealing with, but you're just not ready to confront those words right
great.
now, then you at least know, hey, these are the triggers that we're going to be talking about. And then the groups are engaging. Like sometimes you may have a video session, but you're also able to chat in the group. And if it is a group where your camera has to be on, then you know that before you join. If it's okay for your camera to be off, you know that before you join. So just like the full transparency of what you're walking into, and then we also wanted it to be very easy for people to join. A lot of support groups exist in like churches and even hospitals offer a lot of hospitals offer groups. What I don't like about support groups through hospital, while well meaning, it's just I had a friend who mentioned that they were going to do something pretty severe and the support group was like, you have to call and you have to email someone to
Yeah,
be able to email you back. And then you get these 5 pages of things about the group. And if the schedule changes at the last minute, like there was just no way of knowing that. So there was just this lack of like real time as instant as the world is through like an app. So you get an app to Mental Happy where you can see if there are changes, if there are comments posted, if there's a new resource, right? Let's say, you're leading a group and you wanted to share a practice or a download that people can do at home, and then they have quick access to that link. And on the privacy piece, that was a big part of it is
mhm,
just how safe is this going to be? Am I going to be hit with ads? Am I going to be hit with someone bullying me on the platform? So it was just like all of these things that we just saw what was existing in the market. And we're just like, we can make this experience a lot better for people who are honestly going through like some of the toughest times in their lives, right? Like it shouldn't have to be all of this like really hard detail. And then you can be anonymous. You can ask us questions anonymously if you want. You get a username and a profile, and it's not creepy anonymous where no one is known on the
Right.
platform, but it's at least in a place where you feel comfortable sharing because you knew what the expectations were to start.
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate that. Now, are there specific topics that the support groups offer? Because I've heard people who themselves are going through cancer treatment or have family members, they have support groups they go to for those
Yeah.
types of things, which is very different. So, do you
Yeah.
have the same type of structure within mental health happy as well?
Yeah, the biggest thing that we wanted to solve initially was just like making it easier to run groups.
Yeah,
And so for the flexibility of anyone who's, let's say they are a therapist, let's say they're just maybe an expert group leader, maybe they've been an advocate for a long time and they just want to run the group. They're allowed to create whatever topic that they want. That really works for the platform because the variety is really there in terms of the type of groups that people are able to find. And you hit it right on the head. There are people who create groups for recovery. I've seen groups for people who maybe they were adopted as a child and now they're trying to unravel. It's just, I've seen every group, like maybe someone's was in the military and they're transitioning to becoming a civilian again. Just any life thing that people go through, we typically see an expert. Like today, I saw someone post a group for it was very specific. It was like BIPOC individuals working to heal their mother wound. So the pro group facilitator themselves has the freedom to put whatever, as long as it's within the realm of like health, wellness, or anything like that. And as I was saying before, as to why we don't allow like peer groups is because reflecting back on the experience I had with really all three of the doctors, healthcare in the United States is, and I'm going to say this and say another comment, like it's probably amongst the most accessible in the world. There aren't very many countries where you literally could pass out outside and someone will come and get you, right? Someone calls 911 and whatever we think about healthcare, it's not great and it has all these issues. It's just, it's still amongst the most accessible when you
mhm,
think about other parts of the world. But the parts that's lacking sometimes in the one-to-one experience with clinicians, with providers, is that if there's like a time limit and they're getting straight to the point with like your issues, your diagnosis. And sometimes that's not like at the root of what's causing the symptoms. But with the third doctor that I experienced, it was standard 20, 30-minute, like 30-minute appointment, like maybe 15, 20 minutes of that is like with actually the doctor and you're with the nurse the rest of the time. But she gave me like, I think close to an hour. And it was mostly not talking about the what I was like experience, it was mostly getting to the root of what was causing the symptoms. And she did that in a way of offering me so much education. Keep a journal, write down what you eat every day.
yeah,
These are the foods I want you to eat. And here are the reasons why. And this is how much water I want you to drink in a day. And this is the reason why. It's based on your weight, your height, and just like all these things. So she wasn't at some point she stopped being a doctor and she just became an educator and giving me like really high efficacy of like quality information. And she was educating me on not just how to stop this thing from happening, but it gave me education on how I live my life today, 20 years
right.
later. And with the support groups on why we feel they should be professionally led is because what is missing sometimes in healthcare is really education. Like really someone having the time so it's really great when we see therapists sign up, doctors, acupuncturists, like just clinicians, like we see all kind of experts sign up and run support groups because
Yeah.
so many of them do want to educate their patients. Like we had a metabolic doctor who runs groups for his diabetic patients, and he's just really educating them in a place where they can find community with other people. And so that's the whole reason why we feel like peer support groups are great. They're better than nothing, but the education piece in a place where other people get you is paramount.
Yes, for sure. And what I'm hearing from you is you could attend these support groups in isolation, or they can also be a complement to the therapeutic.
Yeah,
individual work you're doing as well. But one of the
absolutely.
things you identified when we had first chatted was there is a shortage of therapists and
Yeah,
practitioners.
yeah,
And then at the same time, there are limits. So that's what you were alluding to earlier, where it's getting into the issues really quick and trying to work through them, which may or may not always be feasible for the client or the individual. But sometimes they're just running on a limited number of sessions for insurance
you're right.
purposes, coverage, all that.
Right. Yeah.
So this gives another benefit for people that need it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it is my opinion um, that there seems to be a quiet pulling back from insurance because the people are really talking about mental health a lot more. There's more people in therapy than like ever before. And there was a period, maybe about a decade ago, where insurance companies were really starting to incorporate like mental health coverage in insurance. I'm hearing more and more from people on our platform, like customers, that there is a bit of a squeeze from insurance companies that are like pulling back on their coverage, or there's just a lot more denials on the mental health side. A lot of therapists are either considering cash models, trying to find ways to incorporate cash models for patients that they know like likelihood the insurance is not going to cover as many sessions as they need. Maybe they
Mhm.
cover the first two or what have you. So it seems just from initial conversations, I don't have any data around this, but I have talked to the therapists that are just a lot of them are considering a cash model, which tells you that there's something happening in the insurance world. So that part.
Yeah,
Um, and it's great that more people are going to therapists, but insurance is in the business of people not being sick, right? So that they can keep this insurance thing
of
going,
course. Yeah,
um, or not in the business of not paying out. So the second part of that is that again, there is this capacity issue. Before COVID, I read a statistic that was like there are about 31, 32 licensed therapists per every 100,000 people in the United States to help. So if 100,000 people all of a sudden needed help at one time, there's 32 people to fill those appointments. So the number was already alarming before COVID, and then after COVID it became very unmanageable to the point where even as we approach therapists to run groups, like sometimes their initial email is like, "Hey, I'm not taking on any more patients. I'm not taking on any
yeah,
more patients." So there is this need, and then there's also like this unspoken, unseen, like, therapist burnout. Like, they just can't see more people. It's just really hard on your own psyche to hear all the horrible things that other people are going through. It's just really tough. We're all human beings. Like,
yes,
even a doctor is a human and not God, right?
right.
So turning towards groups or having some balance of yes, you run some one-on-one practice, but then you offer some supplemental groups is something that we've seen quite a rise in lately. Our team has been onboarding people that are going to like by the end of the year, like sunset one-to-one and then just solely do groups. Gives them a lot
Yeah,
more flexibility, gives them a lot more freedom. The licensing thing per state is not gonna hold them up because you're just a professional leading a group. You're not
yeah,
agreeing to be that person's therapist.
right.
The group one-on-one therapy should 100% still exist, but the groups really allows a little bit more capacity in some of these services that just it seem to be just on a really spike of a rise right now.
Yeah, yeah, and it sounds based on what you're sharing that the therapists themselves need a support group, right?
We've
For
seen that. We've
yeah,
seen there is I don't know how many, but I've for sure seen a nurses support group. I've seen a frontliners, just like
yeah,
general frontline, so firefighters, police, and then I've also seen like a therapist support group. So
yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah,
definitely
all
exists.
of those professions definitely are susceptible to burnout just based on the nature of the job.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
for sure. And just coming back to the platform itself, are you able to walk us through the technology behind the platform and how it works, just so we can understand?
Yeah, absolutely. So we try to keep it pretty straightforward as easy as it would be to use any app or social site. The first part, I'll start with group participants. So when you come into the platform and you're searching for a group, we're big on like privacy. One of the things we don't do is just kind of blatantly advertise all the groups on the outside of the page. One thing is that some of the groups are hidden, some of the groups are private. So there's a variety of different types of groups. So when you land on the front page, you do have to sign up before you're able to see any groups. I know some people have some mixed feelings about that, but that's just something we do. So you have to sign up with your real name, your real first name, your real last name, and your email. Because again, we started from a place where people were able to join social sites with these masked identities. Maybe it was a bot. So we just want to make sure it's like really humans on the platform. There's like a short intake just to
Yeah.
make sure if you are, what type of emotions have you experienced in the last several months to ensure that you're not at peak crisis, because we have other partners that can deal with that. Or if you're experiencing thoughts of harm, we have other partners that can immediately help with that. And then from there, we have a slew of keywords from everything from any life event you can think of, LGBTQ, marriage, life transitions, just anything you can think of in the sun. You would pick what life event like you're that relates to you. And then we sometimes offer suggestions based on what you've selected. Or you can search once you're in the app. You can put in the keywords, or you can like select the life events that relate to you, and then all the group options will be available. You can see if the group is free, if it accepts donations, if there's price per session, if there's a monthly subscription. We don't control the price of the group, so it really just varies. And again, like I mentioned before, you'll receive the group's landing page so you can see who's running it, what expertise they have, how long they've been doing it, what to expect once you join the group. And if the group is open, like maybe you don't have to request, all you have to do is just click and join or pay and join. Sometimes some groups will have a little extra layer of privacy and you do have to send in a request to join. But once you're in the group, you can chat, you can see a schedule, you can see past conversations, and you're able to, if the group is shareable, you can maybe share it with other people. If it's not and it's private, then it's kept that way. On the technology side, if on the mobile app, we do prevent screenshots. People aren't able to, you can't chat on the web on a laptop, but you can chat through your phone through the app, and we prevent those screenshots. You can ask an anonymous question. So maybe you're feeling a little shy, you really want to ask something, but you just don't want anyone to know that you're the one who asked it. You can
Right.
submit an anonymous question. And then on the group facilitator side, you can, a lot of group facilitators use a lot of tools to run their group. So it's just a lot easier to share a simple link so that people can onboard into your group, control your pricing. You can change your pricing. Maybe you're accepting donations. Maybe you have a monthly fee. Maybe you're charging a one-time fee for, I don't know, 6, 8 week cohort.
Hmm.
And again, all of your clients and patients have access to your group via mobile app. So we keep it pretty friendly in terms of like buttons and things that people are familiar with in other places. We also have a really great resource library
Hmm.
where people can download these anywhere from, it's like a 3 to 5 minute practices on just anything, like how to go negative to positive thoughts, how to have conversations about boundaries with different family members, different types of friends, and what do those prompts look like, and how can you practice doing that in a day.
Yeah.
The resources are really popular on the site as well.
Yeah. Thank you for all of that. It sounds pretty user friendly for sure and easy to access. Now, you said pricing. So I'm assuming the facilitator is the one setting the price,
They
and
do.
and then they set the norms as well for the group, like in terms of what's allowed, what's not allowed.
Yeah, we have an overarching like community platform
Yeah.
guidelines, but then like within their group, they may have additional guidelines for the
Mm,
group as
yeah.
well. So yeah.
Yeah. And then can different facilitators like start a similar support group? Just
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
then it's
So
up
if
to the
there's
individual.
like
Yeah.
10 anxiety groups, then you can decide which one you want to
Right.
join. Because again, sometimes things are very specific. Like maybe it's an anxiety group, but it's about you just graduated, anxiety support for new grads. Like I've
Yeah.
seen all kinds of things. Yeah.
Oh, cool. And who built the platform, like the coding behind it and all of that?
Engineers, not
Yeah.
me.
Okay.
Yeah, we have an amazing engineering team.
So was you had the idea and then did you tell like your software engineers or developers to
Yeah.
put it together?
Yeah, I had to like sketch sketch it out to give them some drawings, give them some specs and documentation on what would the functions be, like the what are some of the call to actions, what's the copy on the site. So yeah, I had to give very specific detail so that engineers can build it because engineers aren't often the creative people.
No. No, not at all. I say that because my background's in engineering.
Yeah, and I learned that it needs to be like granular, very specific. Like
Yes,
they click on this and it ends up going to that, and then that have to like it's just yeah.
for sure. So how has this journey been for you to be an entrepreneur? I think people talk about there's not enough female entrepreneurs, right? And you've stepped into this role. And what would you offer to other entrepreneurs, but like even females in general, in terms of working through the doubt or even sticking to your vision, knowing that it may or may not work out? So, how do you navigate all those different things that come up as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think being a woman entrepreneur adds just a lot more element to it. Just a lot more, I don't want to call them hurdles, but male entrepreneurs just don't think about the same. I remember I was at an event and it was getting late and I was like, oh, I have to get home. And he was like, why? And I was like, I have a small child that I have to cook for and I have a family I have to make dinner for and put down the bed and we have to be pregnant, right? Like during like navigate like building a business and we're still like doing all of our life things. So sometimes, at least for me, is man, men don't know how easy they have it just being just distraction free and being able to just do and build the thing. But on the other side of that, I definitely can see where I experience less bouts of like way less, almost none, to be honest, bouts of like depression and stress and not eating well, not sleeping well, not taking care of myself because not only am I building this thing that I need to be healthy for, I also have a small child that I want to be able to run around and play with and hug. And so it's
Yeah.
just so the things that sometimes feel like, oh man, like it's just like one more thing that you have to do on top of everything. It's the most fulfilling thing that makes building a thing easier. So it's just very, I think at the end of the day, like I've heard a therapist say depression hates a moving target.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you don't have moving targets, he said could be like, yeah, you're not working. Like people immediately think you're not working out, you're not eating right, or you're not getting up and moving your body. But he was like, the moving target could also be other things in life that fulfill you, other things that give you joy. You're chasing something else, right?
Yes.
And family is definitely a really great moving target for me.
Yes. And I would argue it's, in other words, that moving target can be your purpose in life, right? That
Right.
you're working towards. And that's where I think a lot of people can navigate depression differently. Now, if you had any words of advice, what would you offer to people who are going into the entrepreneurial space?
Yeah, I when you look at the entrepreneurial journey, so I have two pieces of advice. Um, the first part is piggybacking off of what I just said is like some of those life things can feel really fulfilling and give you so much more meaning towards working on building something. The best thing I heard when I participated in Y Combinator on the last day of the program is one of the group partners. He said, you have to keep in mind that you're going to be building a business and being a part of that business for maybe like 10 to 15 years. At some point, even if the business does well, like you would have sold it or somebody would have replaced you as CEO, but you're actively working on the thing for
Mhm.
as much as 15 years. Throughout that time, like you should fill up that time with other things that sustain you, other things that give you that motivation to keep building the thing. Like I got to support my family. So I'm building the thing. I want to do this to make them proud. I'm building. That was really important and became like a really true north for me. And it didn't make sense at the time, but once I got married, once I had my own family, made a ton of sense. And I would say the second part is if you look at building something, whatever it is, if you look at it as I'm just really here, like sifting through information, think of yourself as like an observer or a data scientist, if you know what that is.
Yes.
Just think of yourself as like you're just here exploring, like you're here just like learning and moving forward. You're learning and then you're just like moving forward. And I think if you look at it in the perspective of you're learning this thing because this is going to be the thing, or maybe you're doing this learning because it's catapulting you and giving you a step to another thing. Like
Yeah.
whatever you do, win or lose, rise or fall, like it all, like when you look back at your life on most things, usually the dots connect, right? More
Yes.
often than not. Oh, I see why that happened because it led to that. So you just have to assume, I think Steve Jobs said this, you just have to assume the dots are going to connect forward as well.
Yeah.
So my favorite thing to say to entrepreneurs is just really just keep going, learning, and just looking at it as, oh, this is a fun thing that I'm like sifting through and exploring today and learning.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I hear that, I think it can be tough to wrap your head around it, but not having any specific attachments to any specific outcome. Because I think when we tend to visualize an outcome, we're almost selling ourselves short at times because when
Yeah.
we're going through that exploratory journey, you never know where you're going to end up. And sometimes you are your own limit, but when you work past that, you can have more discoveries that you didn't think you would have. So I think
Yeah.
that's the other piece is not getting too attached and being open and curious to see whatever's coming up and looking at everything as an opportunity. Like even if things don't materialize the way you think they should
Right.
or you thought they would, you're still walking away with knowledge that you didn't have before. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people get stuck in that fear and are unable to take that risk because they're worried it's not gonna turn out the way they want it to.
Yeah, and the thing with entrepreneurship is just like whenever you're a builder, a maker, it just almost never looks the way
Yes.
you thought it was going to look. My favorite example is the Kellogg's guy. He was working on something else. I think
Yeah.
something medicine related. Like he was just not trying to make cereal, right? And then ended up making cereal.
Yeah.
So, and when you look at the history of most companies, it was just something completely different before. Like even with us with Mental Happy, like we started off with a physical product and then people started asking questions about like communities in our social media group. And I started just being curious, sifting through the
Yeah.
information I was given and just being curious and ask and like getting people on the phone, like, hey, would you be open to doing an interview with me? Because I just wanted to know what type of community you were looking for. And that's how it just snowballed into, oh, okay, I see. You want like smaller and smaller. That's support groups. Like people they didn't really have the language for that, but that's really what it was. Yeah, it's just most things. My favorite billboard, I don't know if it's still up, but it was like, I think up in LA, Netflix had this billboard and it was like, it says something to the effects of remember the fact that Netflix started by selling like DVDs for
Yeah.
the first 20 years.
Yeah.
And then below it said, don't give up, keep going. Like that's so impact. Like for 20 years they were, and for a long time, even in that 20 years when DVDs became this outdated technology, they were still selling it,
Right.
probably at a loss, probably not doing well until they hung in there long enough to figure out the streaming platform. And
Yeah.
now the whatever 15, 20 years of whatever they were going through and all those hardships means nothing now that they're worth billions, right?
For sure.
So
Yeah.
so sometimes it could feel that way.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we don't see all the adversity behind the scenes. You only see the success at times, and that's where I think a lot of people also get stuck to is when the second when things get tough, your bank account balance is in the negative, you're like, "Oh, I can't do
Right.
this," and you wanna run.
Yeah.
That's what makes the whole story. The
Yeah.
success is what on the surface.
Yeah, and I would even parallel it with like life things, right? And I think that's the pitfalls that people get stuck in with social media is just like when somebody posts something, they are sharing the most peak moment of their life. They're sharing like that winner moment, right? Like maybe they're sharing that they just got married, but you don't know how many horrific dates and heartbreaks and frogs
Yeah,
that either one of them had to kiss to really get there. And then you also don't know that, hey, they probably just argued 5 minutes before the switch snapped,
yeah,
and you also don't know their future. I think sometimes with social media, like you said, you just don't see all the adversity that the person went through on the background. They're just really sharing that 20-second soundbite, that 10-second highlight.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And one more thing you had mentioned earlier, I just want to make sure there's clarity around it. You talked about therapists using the cash model. What does that mean?
Yeah. Been talking with a lot of therapists, provider, their number one thing for a long time was like, they accept insurance, accept insurance. What we've seen really accelerated even in the last 5 years, I would say, post COVID is so, for example, just I got an email this year, like a couple months ago, from a physical therapist I used to take my kid to. It's just like something pretty common. Babies tend to like to sleep in the same
Yeah,
position every night. And then sometimes they get to just their bodies, some part of their body just gets stuck that way. So a little physical therapy helps just for people to know. Anyway, so this physical therapist, we were using insurance, sent an email that said, hey, due to really just like the changing landscape of insurance. And they gave it a very specific example. So they said, for example, we pay physical therapists X per hour and we charge you X per hour. The insurance, based on your coverage, let's say you have a 90-10 split, an 80-20
yep,
split, the insurance will say, yeah, this person qualifies for the 90% to be paid. But then insurances don't necessarily have to do that. So they'll say they'll bill the insurance, let's say $1,200. And then the insurance will come back and say, actually, we're only going to give you 110. But they needed to pay this physical therapist 150.
great.
And then that's just for the physical therapist, right? What about the business costs? The
Yes,
over like the electricity, the this, the that, and then the insurance that the business has to carry themselves, right? For liability reasons. They mentioned that they're switching to this cash model because they just need to, at the very least, cover the overhead cost of having a building to manage, employees, and then the person that they had working on your kid, right? Like they have to pay
for
that
sure.
person a salary. So the cash model is oftentimes what we've seen a therapist saying, hey, like I did couples therapy a few years ago with my husband, and she just charged us $200 per 50-minute session. And she didn't accept insurance. And that was just her model. She was like one of the best in the state in this particular area.
Yeah,
And that was just her model of choice. Like she doesn't want to have to, she was like, I could try to build the insurance $400, $600. They usually come back giving me less than
yeah,
the $200 anyway.
right,
So if you can afford it, there's two sides to the cash model. It's kind
right,
of like less bill anxiety
for sure.
for the insured person. Like you go
Yes,
to a hospital, right? And then you get this big bill that you really didn't expect and you thought insurance was going to cover more than they did. So it's just like very straightforward and transactional. But $200 for 50 minutes could be like a real hike for someone that was expecting to pay $45 with insurance. I see both sides of it. I think a lot of therapists are just like working to navigate like what makes sense.
but then in that case, the patient or the client is having to pay out of pocket essentially.
Yeah, essentially, the
Yeah,
cash model is like you're paying out, and I've seen it pop up for a lot of things that I hadn't seen before, even in a few years. A dentist will offer you a cash model. They'll say, and I've even seen dentists do subscription services like pay X amount per month. Then, and chiropractors, they've been in the cash game a lot
yeah,
longer because chiropractic long ago wasn't covered by insurance
right,
unless you were in a car accident or something like that. I've seen a lot of interesting formats and support groups work, right? Because it's like you're getting volume in in the cash game, right? There's 12 people in the group, 15 people in the group. So if you're charging, I don't know, $20 a month, $30 a month, or $145 a session times those number of people, it makes your time worth it.
for sure. No, thank you for walking us through that. But Tamara, this has been great. Really love the work you're doing. It's definitely meaningful, as we've talked about, purpose driven, and making a huge difference. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come on today and share your story. Now, for listeners that want to learn more about mental happy or yourself, what are some ways they can find you online or your work?
Yeah, definitely. So if you are looking to join a support group or looking to find one, go to mentalhappy.com. At the top, it says find support groups. Same website, mentalhappy.com, if you're looking to get started on hosting your own group. You can just click on the get started button. It just takes a few minutes to set up your group. And I'm on LinkedIn if anybody is still there,
Yeah.
and all the other social platforms as well.
Cool. Thank you so much again. We'll put all of that in the show notes. And yeah, again, appreciate you coming on here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Furkhan.